Hi everyone, and welcome to this on-demand webinar on our Carbon Minds database. I'm Arne Kittelin, I'm Managing Director and Co-founder at Carbon Minds, and over the next couple of minutes I would like to give you an introduction to our database. Why did we build it? How did we build it? What are the typical use cases? And if you're interested, how can you get started? But before we jump into the database, just a quick note on this webinar. This is an on-demand webinar, so as you might have guessed, this video is pre-recorded, but you can still use the chat in this webinar. So you can send us messages, you can ask questions, and we will be in touch shortly after via email. First of all, a quick introduction to Carbon Minds. And in short, Carbon Minds is all about data and it's all about sustainability. We've built what is today the world's largest lifecycle database for chemicals and plastics. So it's the data that our customers use for their product carbon footprint calculations, for their lifecycle assessments, for Scope 3 assessments, or to inform their environmental strategy. We also have a service business where we help our customers use the data, for example, through implementation services, but also where we can conduct the reportings for them, or do strategic assessments, for example, on emission reduction potentials and pathways to net zero. And last but not least, we have a training business where we help sustainability teams getting up to speed, basically learning the latest news about lifecycle assessment, product carbon footprint methodologies, and I help them build the capacities that they need for their in-house teams. And we have the pleasure to work with quite a variety of companies along the entire chemical value chain, from oil and gas over the chemical industries to downstream industries such as fast-moving consumer goods or techs, basically everywhere where chemicals and plastics are used for the production. And I'm sure you might know some of these names. And our customers are usually facing quite similar challenges. When we think about environmental assessments or about the emissions of my company or my product, the first thing that pops up in the heads of many practitioners are, of course, the direct emissions. You see your production sites, there are chimneys, there are emissions coming out of them. Yeah, and you know there might be also a big electricity bill connected to it. But these direct and energy-related emissions are usually only a relatively small part of the emissions that a company or a product is causing. If we take the chemical industry as an example, it's 24% according to a recent report by CDP. And the by far larger part of emissions comes from both the up and downstream supply chain. So it comes from the extraction of the raw materials that companies are using. So it comes from the extraction of the resources that a company is using. It comes from all these production steps that get us from the resources to the raw materials that your company might be buying. It also includes the use case and the end of life of your products. And these supply chains, they are long, they often stretch over many different countries. There are many different players involved. Yeah, so it's quite complex. But yet, these emissions are usually the largest part of a company's emissions, so visibility in supply chain emissions is really key for reliable reporting and efficient climate strategies. But this visibility is often not given due to limits in data availability. If we just look into the number, about 23,000 chemicals are used every day in industry. And here we took the REACH registrations as an indicator. If we compare this number with the number of chemicals that are covered in typical LCA databases, you will see that usually only a small fraction is covered, and suppliers also often cannot provide the data. Yeah, so these data gaps, they are kind of structural blind spots in emissions inventory that might conceal important hotspots or reduction options. But there are also more hidden gaps, and the consistency gap is a really important one. If you collect data from different suppliers and maybe different other data sources, the underlying methodology might not always be the same. And the methodology has a massive impact on the results, yeah, and also on the data quality. So due to this inconsistency in the underlying methodology, the assessment is not really comparable anymore. And there's a risk of misinterpretation, or failed audits, or reputational damage even. And finally, many data sources have very generic data. So for example, country average data. But supply chains can vary quite a lot, even across countries. So by using this generic data, we usually see an actionability gap, because this data is kind of hiding reduction levers and the action for climate impact reductions that can result from them. So we can say that some companies are simply flying blind in the sustainability transition. By not having visibility on supply chain emissions, they might miss important hotspots in the emission profiles of their product, of their company. They might miss important reduction levers. And by missing these reduction methods, they might have quite costly and inefficient climate strategies. And this is something that we are trying to change at Carbon Minds by making emissions visible with our Carbon Minds database. So how did we build it? As first step, we had to understand where chemicals are produced, because the production in different production levers differs quite substantially. At the next step, we needed to look into all the different production locations and understand what are the exact technologies that are used to produce the chemicals at the different stages of the supply chain. Because chemicals can usually be produced from different feedstocks using completely different production technologies, and they lead to difference in emissions. And finally, we needed to understand chemical trade. At Carbon Minds, for example, we're located in the Cologne region, where we have a lot of chemical production from Germany. And many of the raw materials, they are coming in via Rotterdam, they are traded through the Netherlands and then end up in Germany. Yeah, so only by understanding these trade flows, we can understand chemical supply chain. We collected this information. We did our life cycle assessments for the different chemicals, different production chain, and published the results in the Carbon Minds database, what is today the world's most comprehensive product carbon footprint and life cycle assessment database for chemicals and plastics. And in short, the database is large. It contains more than 139,000 data sets covering the production of 1,500 chemicals, or by now I think 1,700 chemicals in more than 200 countries. And what is important, it's compliant with the major standards, so it's compliant with the ISO standard, but the ISO standard still leaves quite some choices, so it's additionally compliant with Together for Sustainability standard, which is the leading standard for chemical value chains, as well as the standards by UEL and RTL for lubricants production. Yeah? And our data is periodically reviewed by and certified by TÜV Rheinland for methodological compliance. So if you look into our database, and here I brought a small example, it's propylene production, we can first of all see that many different countries are covered. And as I said, it's important to cover these many different countries because emissions can be quite different. Here we brought the example for the climate change impact category. We see similar pictures for other impact categories. If we compare the different countries to, for example, the global average, we can see that the global average can be twice as high compared to the carbon footprints from the cleaner production regions, or maybe half the emissions of the more emission-intensive production regions. So it's important that we get the emissions of countries right. But we can zoom in even much further. And here I would like to take China as an example, because it's the world's largest producer of polypropylene. And here we can see that in China, quite a number of different technologies are used. And those are not fancy new technologies at pilot stage. So these are really world-scale production plants covering a very big share of the production in the world. So it's important to understand the difference in emissions between countries. But there are many different suppliers in the different countries, and they use different production technologies. So if we use China as the world's largest producers for polypropylene as an example, we can see that the suppliers that are located in China use quite a variety of technologies. We have coal-based production, for example. Those are the columns that lead to the higher impact here. But we also have production with lighter hydrocarbons if we go further to the left. And these technologies, they are also operating at world scale with large capacities, and they lead to completely different carbon footprints. Yeah, so it's important not only to understand what country your product is coming from, but also how it has been produced, because technologies really matter. And at Carbon Minds, we can bring this information together with the information of who produces them and provides the data on a supplier-specific level. Yeah, so we can basically tell you what is the difference in product carbon footprint if you buy from company A or company B, maybe in the same countries. And as you can see here, these differences can be huge, yeah? Easily a factor of more than 10, depending on where you buy. And this large variability in emissions between suppliers, it's also an opportunity because it's a reduction lever. Yeah, so you can use this information for your supplier engagement programs, but also to inform sustainable purchasing decisions. Our data in the Carbon Minds database is structured in two products. On the one hand, we have the CM Chemicals database, large number of chemicals, all production regions covered, and country average data. And if we want to go to the supplier-specific data, we have our supplier footprint analytics product, which is available for 72 of the world's largest chemical commodities, so chemicals and plastics, and this provides the most detailed benchmarking view. But as I said, when we have chemical databases, and even the Carbon Minds database, which is quite large, there are still data gaps. Yeah? So we combine this data suite or these databases with our service offering, where we help you close the remaining data gaps. We do this on the one hand by mapping your data needs with our database. So basically you can give us lists of thousands of materials, and we will find the best available emission factors. We can close data gaps either with proxies or with custom modeling. And we can help you implement the data in your systems or in your studies through our chemical experts. Yeah, so we provide the data, but we don't leave you alone with this. We help you apply it in the most efficient way. And if you want to learn how this looks like in action, we're super happy to share a number of case studies with you, for example, from Avient, Bayer, Brenntag, Henkel, Lanxess, or Sipchem. So if you would like to receive one of these case studies, you should see an interaction now on your screen. Just select the case study or those case studies that you're interested in, and we're happy to send it to you. If you have the feeling that you can also use chemical life cycle data for your analysis or for your company, we would also invite you to engage with us. And in order to get started in our experience, it's always good to clarify the data needs and what we can cover at what quality. And for this, we have a free service, which is very, very quick also, where you can just tell us what you need. Yeah, so we will ask you for lists of CAS numbers. You fill them in. These can be thousands of CAS numbers. Yeah, so we do this sometimes for more than 10,000 substances per customer. And within a couple of days, we will develop a mapping report for you, where we analyze which of these substances we can cover with direct matches. So direct matches means that we have a data set that is exactly for this product, for the required technology and region. And these direct matches will come either from our database directly or from our development pipeline. So these are basically chemicals that we have in stock to be included in the database at a later point. And if you need them, we can usually deliver them within a very, very short delivery period and model them for you on demand. If this is not possible, We can also map your data against potential proxies. We have different approaches. We can analyze for chemical similarity, so basically find the most similar molecule in our database, or based on HS codes, so that are codes that are used at customs for international trade, which define clusters of different chemicals. And in some cases, we might not have the exact chemical, but another chemical within this cluster, or several chemicals in this cluster of similar substances, which we can use for proxies. And these proxies, they are always good if you need the substance for completeness, but if it's not the major contribution to your study. And for those really important substances which really determine the results of your studies, we also provide custom modeling. So we basically model whatever is missing for you. And again, if you're interested to talk to us, to learn more about the database, maybe get your own mapping report, yeah, we're really happy to talk to you. Just use this interaction. Click what is the preferable next step to you, and we will be sure to get in touch. Yeah, and this is the end of our webinar. I would like to thank you for watching, if you made it until this spot. And yeah, I hope you get in touch with us. Thank you and goodbye.